Once upon a time, a crowd of hungry people was lined up at Tiana's palace, waiting for their chance to sample the restaurant's famous beignets. It was rumored throughout all New Orleans that the pastries were magical. They made dreams come true.
Once upon a time, in a Roxbury, Dorchester neighborhood, youth were entering kindergarten with far less words than their counterparts in more affluent communities. No one could figure out why until they learned about an important study.
A study was done probably 8 to 10 years ago now, looking at the number of words that young children hear. And they did this study in poor communities, middle-class communities, and upper-class communities. And what they discovered that there was a 30 million word difference between the number of words an upper-class child heard versus a poor child. And not only were they concerned about the number of words, but also the quality of those words. More affluent children were engaged in conversations that were language rich. And by that I mean somebody would be reading a book to them and then would ask them a question about the book, or would be describing the pictures in the book. Oh, look, she's playing on a red bike, driving down the street. How many blue houses do you see? So they would really help the child to use those words and really give them descriptive words. A poor child, somebody would say, even if they were asking the child to bring them the broom, they would say, go get that and bring it to me. So what's that? And how many different words, if you never are hearing the name of that object being given to you, how are you going to know that that thing is called a broom or that thing is called a book if all you're hearing is, bring me that, don't do that, stop that. So it was the quality of the words as well. And so if you don't hear words that are going to excite you and make you want to look or learn, then you start tuning out. And that's what was the difference, that children who came from more affluent communities were getting a lot richer language. And so what we need to do in our communities, we need to adopt the skills, the habits of people who are more successful. We want our children to be successful.
With this new knowledge, we, the youth at DSNI, decided to make a movie on the topic of early literacy because we felt that we needed to make a change in our neighborhood, and what a better way to start with the future of our community.
So what made you guys choose early literacy for the topic of your film?
I think we chose this topic because I feel as if though this community is lacking in not focusing on this topic enough, so I think this is one of the topics we should really focus on, but no one's paying attention to it.
In addition to Jerry, I think we also chose to focus on this topic because we saw how like the lack of words between younger kids of younger age, how that was having like a major effect on them when they enter kindergarten, and also the interaction they have with their parents and in art school.
And also, as kids get older, they'll start falling behind even more. So it's good to attack early literacy at an early stage, so that in the future, kids won't have any other problems, and so that they'll be able to get a career of their choice, and not to have any handicap.
And we also wanted the parents to know, like, it's not your fault, and in cooperation with teachers, like, we could make the community a better place and vocabulary strong for the younger kids so that their futures could be better.
Adding on what everybody says, it's just letting the parents know and the community know, like, there's a problem and that we need to fix it, and it must be started at like a younger age, so then later they won't have problems during their process.
Yeah, and basically we wanted to increase the kids' vocabulary in order to them to pass the third grade MCAS, so they can be successful on the MCAS that may come in the front.
During the making of this film, we did research and interviewed parents on how many words they think their child should know when entering kindergarten.
As many as possible, as many as you can learn.
More than me.
Thousands. Hundreds of thousands.
I'm just going to focus on making sure he loves reading, and then as he gets older, I'm assuming I maybe beat that and go way and above that.
There are many different studies out there that give different amounts of words, a child should know before entering kindergarten. Although parents should strive for children to have as many as possible, the number isn't as important as the fact that children in Roxbury and Dorchester are often behind. But what is early literacy, and why is it so important? We asked some people from our community to help explain it further.
Early literacy is when a child has lots of words, lots of understanding of the things that are going on around them, and all of those words are going to be things that they're going to need later as they enter school, to be able to turn those words into reading and into writing.
Early literacy is so important because it's the foundation to learning. If you get to school, if you get to kindergarten, and you have built enough vocabulary, interest in reading, focus, where you can sit there and listen to somebody read or even pretend like you're reading a book, then you've got the foundations needed to do well.
I think early literacy is probably the single most important developmental and academic aspect of a child's life. Everything that we do as learners, as children, as adolescents, and as adults has to do with our ability to read, has to do with our ability to write well. I think that we do an unbelievable amount of thinking and learning through our reading and writing. And so literacy is just something that is ingrained in our lives.
It's important for our children to be school ready. And part of how our children get to be school ready is by their parents working in their lives as first teachers, so that their parents are the first ones helping them to introduce them to words, help to introduce them to lots of new vocabulary that will help get them ready for school.
We now know that early literacy is the foundation of a child's life, and what a child does in their first years of school can possibly harm them down the road. Researchers say that third grade reading proficiency often predicts future success in school and career. Last year in Boston, only 35% youth scored proficient or above on their MCAS, which is just over half that of the state average. While white students met the state average, African American students scored the lowest, with Hispanic students scoring only slightly higher.
I also think that our schools haven't really figured out how to serve all children well. And so when you think about all the different types of learners that come to a school, we tend to do the best with kids who already have a good, strong foundation. And we tend to struggle the most at schools with kids who need additional support and additional help in reading. And so I think our schools are stretched really thin, and that oftentimes there just aren't the resources that there need to be to help all children learn how to read.
What happens is when children enter school with a lesser vocabulary or less ready, once they enter school, then they are more than likely to stay behind.
The pipeline to prison is a term used by people to connect the quantity of prison cells to the number of third graders who failed their MCAS. Third grade is an important grade because it is the bridge between learning to read and reading to learn.
Most school curriculum is designed where you are learning to read by the third grade. So by the third grade, they're teaching you how to read. When you get to third grade and beyond, you are reading to learn. You start doing math problems in using words. You start learning history using words. You start learning biology. So all of those things means that before you got to do those subjects, you had to learn how to read. That's why, reading and literacy is fundamental to everything we've designed in our education system and in society. And if we're not paying attention to learning how to read very, very early on, we're going to end up setting up a child to be in a position where he's going to fail in society and probably end up in jail.
It's incredibly depressing, and it's a big reason for what I try to do every single day. I think I'm a big believer that in our society and in this democracy, there is, it's a basic human right that every single child should have a good education. And if we concentrated on ensuring that every single child had a great education, we would break that pipeline to prison. And I think all too often what happens is that the educational system really lets our children down, and that we as a society just aren't committed. And so all too often it's easier for a child to go to jail than it is to go to college. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. It's costs our society an unbelievable amount of money. I think it's a a fracture in the foundation of our democracy. And I just think that as a society and as a city, we can do better.
A parent is a child's first teacher, which means that parents are responsible for preparing their kids for school. Here are some tips to do that.
But what we try to emphasize with families is this whole talk, read, play that Countdown to Kindergarten with Boston Public Schools promotes. And that's about engaging with your children, bonding with your children, having fun with your children while you talk with them through reading, through playing, and building those words.
The first thing parents can do from the very beginning is to talk to their babies. Some people think it's silly because they say, well, the baby doesn't understand me, the baby can't talk back. But the baby is hearing words and beginning to understand and associate all those sounds with the things that are around them. In particular, if somebody's picking up a baby and taking them and walking them around and talking about all the different things they see in the room and naming and touching those things, the baby's going to do the same thing several months later. So they really need parents to set a good example from the very beginning, that learning is something that's fun and exciting to do.
The important thing that's missing in a lot of our kids is reading. Get the kids to read really, really early. Even if you don't read English, or if you are not literate or you're not comfortable with your accent, there are tons of libraries in the area that has days where you could just bring your child for reading sessions. I don't have, I'm not sure which library is at what time, but parents, it's free, and parents can just drop their kids and have somebody else read to them. That is such a piece that's missing in our community, in our kids. And also, you know, talk to your kids, because they have to come in with the language skills that are really missing.
Maybe your child at 2 years old will only sit still for 10 minutes of a story. That's okay.
Start talking to your child. Walk in the community. Point the rocks. Point the bugs. Go to the library.
But building vocabulary is not just about reading. You can build vocabulary through play.
The parents need to understand that they're their child's first and most important teacher. That their child is learning from them even when they don't think they're learning, because young children don't decide, well, this is something good to know and that's something that they shouldn't know. They're really watching and observing their parents, and that's how they first learn about the world. So if they see their parents reading, then they're going to know that reading is something that is good, because children usually want to do whatever their parents are doing.
The responsibility for making a change is just not on the shoulders of the parents. The community has a role to play, and there are many things that can be done to make a change.
A lot of our parents, especially at this school, may be coming to this country for the first time, and so they're dealing with all sorts of different issues, and so time is a big issue for parents. And so I think one thing is helping parents to find the time to do some of this with their children. And I think the other big piece is that it can be intimidating. We have a lot of parents who maybe necessarily didn't have the greatest school experience themselves, and so they might not feel like they're competent readers and writers. And so they might not actually feel comfortable trying to kind of be the first teacher for their children. And so I think that as a community, we can really help to raise the literacy rates of our children if we also work to raise the literacy rates of our adults. I think there are a few simple things that we could do for the adults in our community to really empower them and give them the tools to be able to work with their children in those early years.
But some parents aren't as inclined to read or likely to read to their children as other parents are. Pull in an older sibling, or perhaps an aunt, or perhaps a grandparent who would take the time to be able to sit down, because sometimes it's a family effort.
We can also hang letters up in different stores, so that if I show my son an A at home, and then we go to a local sub shop like Ideal Sub Shop up the street, that he can see an A on the wall, and I can say, look, what is that? It's an A. And we can also have that exchange out in the community. So I think there are different ways we can set up the community and design it where it's helpful, where class is also happening outside, where it's not just happening in the home or in the school.
Well, you know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. And so we have to see all of ourselves as those village people, that it's everybody's responsibility. And I think one thing we can do is do by example. So when children are out and about, the people that are out and about too should be using good language, not using swears, not using slang, those things, because again, if that's what a child hears, they can't decide that that's not the right way to speak. So we have to set good examples no matter where you are, whether you're on the bus, walking on the street, in the parks, in the stores, just by setting good examples.
With hard work, education, and persistence, parents and the community can eliminate the word gap and change the literacy issues many young children face in Roxbury and Dorchester.
After all, look at what happened to Tiana.
She came into a frog, falling in love, married a frog prince, and she became a real princess.
To top it all off, she now owned the restaurant of her dreams. The end.